Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry for the delay this morning. The good news is we've been able to welcome 4 new shareholders that just registered for the meeting, so they were able to join us since 8 o'clock. I'll call the meeting to order at 8:15. Good morning and welcome to the annual general meeting of the shareholders of Pure Life Carbon. My name is Mark Starrett and I'm the board chair of the corporation. In accordance with the bylaws of the corporation, I'll assume the position of chair for this meeting. And on behalf of Pure Life Carbon, I wish to thank those attending on Zoom and in person for this meeting. At the meeting, the shareholders of the corporation will be asked to consider and vote on routine annual business, being to receive and consider the financial statements of Pure Life Carbon for the financial year ended August 31st, 2021, appoint the board of directors until the next annual general meeting, as well as receiving a corporate update from the management and board. Following that, we will have a question and answer period with our CEO, Ryan Rand. Before we begin the formal business of the meeting, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the directors of the corporation who are all in attendance here today. Off camera, we have Gord Anderson, Jim Hole, Sean Graham, Fred Munn, Bruce Picton, myself, and our CEO, Ryan Rand. A number of people may be present today who are not shareholders of the company. I welcome you as guests of the meeting to observe the proceedings. However, I respectfully ask that you refrain from participating in the meeting when the call for voting is conducted or for questions. Participation is a right reserved only for the registered shareholders of Pure Life Carbon or their designated proxy holders. All votes will be validated after the AGM, and that came from the registered shareholders, and a communication will go out after the meeting. In order to ensure that the meeting covers the required business in an efficient manner, we have prearranged with designated shareholders and proxy holders to move and second the motions of the business. This procedure is in no way intended to discourage any motions duly made and seconded. I invite registered shareholders or the proxy holders to speak to any of the motions duly made. Upon completion of the formal meeting, members of the management and board of directors will be available to respond to any questions arising from the meeting or with respect to the affairs of Pure Life Carbon. Before commencing with the formal business of the meeting, I'll briefly explain the voting procedures that will be followed. Each of the votes held at today's meeting will be conducted by way of poll questions through the voting capability of Zoom and in the room amongst registered shareholders. Only registered shareholders and duly appointed proxy holders are entitled to vote directly at this meeting. Some of the shareholders of the corporation are beneficial shareholders and hold their shares through a brokerage firm or other registered shareholder. Beneficial shareholders cannot vote at this meeting, but will have the opportunity through an instrument of proxy to instruct the brokerage firm or hold securities on their behalf how to vote on their behalf. Therefore, votes of beneficial shareholders will be presented by proxy, provided that such beneficial shareholders have properly completed and delivered an instrument of proxy. Again, if you're a beneficial shareholder only, you cannot vote in person at this meeting. Further, we invite shareholders to ask questions via our Q&A feature in the Zoom webinar at the appropriate time. These questions will be addressed towards the end of the meeting during the Q&A component of the agenda. I see that there's already a question in the chat room from before we got started. And yes, we will be sending out a recording of this as a shareholder communication probably early next week. We'll now proceed with the formal business of the meeting. The annual general meeting of the shareholders of Pure Life Carbon will now come to order. And if there are no objections, I have asked Wendy Scarrett to act as secretary of the meeting and Gord Anderson to act as scrutineer of the meeting. The scrutineer will report on the shareholders present in person and by proxy at this meeting, and will also tabulate the results of any ballot or poll taken at this meeting after the fact. Pursuant to the bylaws of Pure Life Carbon, a quorum of shareholders is present if at least one person present in person being a shareholder entitled to vote at the meeting, or a duly appointed representative or proxy holder for an absent shareholder so entitled or holding or representing not less than 51% of the issued and common shares entitled to vote at the meeting. Looking at the scrutineer's report. So the scrutineer's report has been received, and it shows that as of now, there are present at this meeting 65 shareholders holding or representing proxy 22,263,452 shares, or roughly 75.63% of the issued and outstanding shares of the corporation. I shall now ask the secretary to table proof of emailing of the notice of the meeting to the registered shareholders of the corporation. With the consent of the meeting, the reading of the notice of the annual general meeting will be dispensed with. Thank you. And I believe that's showing up on our screen now, the proof of that email. I now declare that the meeting is regularly called and properly constituted for the transaction of business. The approval of the 2021 AGM minutes. Our previous annual general meeting took place on July 8th, 2021. The minutes of the AGM were provided in the notice to shareholders sent by Fred Munn on July 1st, 2022. I move that the minutes of the July 8th, 2021 meeting be approved.
Mr. Chair, I second the motion.
Thank you. Fred Munn seconds the motion. You've heard the motion. Is there any discussion about the minutes of the annual general meeting? Hearing none, Christine, I would invite you to put up the poll for our first vote of the day, which is the approval of the AGM minutes. Give people a couple of moments. Perfect. We'll call the voting closed. And I declare the motion carried. Thank you. Just as a note to our technical staff, we are getting a comment that says that the group chat may not be open. So if we can take a look at that to make sure. I don't see any active chat questions on my screen, but as we move forward, if we could take a look at that as well. The next item for business is a presentation of the annual consolidated financial statements of the corporation for the fiscal years ended August 31st, 2021. Copies of the foregoing have been previously sent to the shareholders of the corporation in accordance with applicable laws. We would be pleased to answer any questions regarding the financial statements after the formal business of the meeting has been concluded during our Q&A. I would ask Pure Life Carbon's chair of the Finance, Risk and Audit Committee, Bruce Picton, to provide a brief summary of the financial statements.
Thank you, Mark. Good morning, Pure Life Carbon shareholders and other interested parties. As part of your shareholder information for the AGM, you received a copy of the Pure Life Carbon Inc. non-consolidated financial statements for the year ended August 31st, 2021. I'd like to draw your attention to the Independent Practitioners Review Engagement Report that was prepared by BDO for these statements. What's important is the conclusion, and I'll quote from BDO, "Based on our review, nothing has come to our attention that causes us to believe that these non-consolidated financial statements do not present fairly in all material respects the financial position of Pure Life Carbon Inc. as at August 31st, 2021, and the results of its operations and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian accounting standards for private enterprises." I'd further direct your attention to emphasis of matter paragraphs, which draw attention to note 1, which is a going concern note, and note 13, which talks about the combination of the information. Moving forward on the financial statements, I'd like to draw your attention to the non-consolidated balance sheet. At the end of August 31st, 2021, total assets of the Pure Life Carbon were $6.3 million. Primarily, that was made up of $2.3 million of cash and $3 million of plant, property, and equipment. You can go to note 5 of the financial statements and you'll find that most of that plant, property, and equipment relates to our RDC facility. Total liabilities at the end of August 31st, 2021 were $5 million. Much of that was related to long-term debt, which was primarily made up of our debentures and then accounts payable. And again, Detailed notes in the financial statements indicate the composition of those amounts. The accounts payable, a bulk of that was related to the ongoing construction of our RDC facility. I think it's important to note that at the end of August 31st, 2021, our share capital was $5.2 million. And note 10 of the financial statements, which is found on page 14 of my statements, indicates that 26,313,515 Class A common shares were outstanding for that balance of $5.2 million at that point in time. Moving forward to the income statement, clear from the income statement that we're pre-revenue organization, and that impacted the audit, or the review engagement commentary on and note 1 of us having a going concern. You'll note at the end for the period ended August 31st, 2021, we had a net loss of $3.4 million. Further, I'd like to draw your attention to the non-consolidated statement of cash flows for the organization. This is, I find, a pretty insightful statement. Cash flow used by operating activities through the year was approximately $3.3 million. Cash flow used by investing activities was about 2.421, and cash flow brought in through financing activities was $8 million. So cash at the end of August 31st, 2021, cash on hand was $2.3 million. That is, a short summary of the financial statements for the year ended August 31st, 2021. At this point in time, I'd like to move that the reading of the annual non-consolidated financial statements of the corporation for the financial year ended August 31st, 2021 be approved.
Is there a seconder to the motion?
I second the motion.
Perfect. Thank you. Fred Munn seconds the motion. The motion is on the table, and I'd invite the poll to be brought up to vote on our financial statements. Perfect. Just a few more moments until we'll close the vote. The vote is now closed, and we have a unanimous vote in favor. Thank you very much. The next item of business is the waiver for the appointment of the auditors of the corporation. It is proposed that no appointment be made for auditors of the corporation at this time. But I'll invite our chair of our FRC committee again, Bruce Picton, to come to speak to that motion and to make the motion.
Thanks, Mark. At this point in time, I move that no appointment be made for auditors of the corporation at this time, but we reappoint BDO as accountants for the corporation. I'd like to a seconder for that motion.
I second the motion.
You've heard the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I would invite the poll to be open for the approval of the reappointment of BDO as accountants. In a moment, we'll close the voting. The voting is now closed for the appointment of BDO, reappointment of BDO as our accountants, and the motion has passed. The next item up for business is to vote for the Board of Directors to serve until the 2023 Annual General Meeting. It should be noted at this time that we fully intend to have the Annual General Meeting, our next one, earlier in February or March of next year. The idea being is that as soon as our financial statements are prepared, reviewed by the board, and ready to be presented to an annual general meeting, there are many things happening in the company, and it's the desire of your board and the management team to be in front of shareholders a little bit earlier in the process. And so this next motion serves to appoint the board until the next annual general meeting. So the board of directors will include Ryan Rand, Fred Munn, Mark Starrett, Gord Anderson, Sean Graham, Bruce Picton, and Jim Hole. And I move that we vote for the board of directors to serve until the 2023 annual general meeting. Is there a seconder for the motion?
Mr. Chair, I second the motion.
Thank you. Seconded by Fred Munn. You've heard the motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I invite the poll to be opened for the voting of this motion to appoint the board of directors till the next annual general meeting. Perfect. And those in the room as well? Thank you. I'll now close the vote. Thank you. That has been overwhelmingly approved as well. Thank you very much for that. We now move on to the corporate update from the board and management. And thank you for whoever texted in. The chat has now been opened. We do have our first question that we'll get to a little bit later as it relates to the financial statements. But I will invite Bruce Picton now to speak to an update on the progress of financial stewardship and risk metrics of the corporation. He will be one of two speakers before we get to the Q&A with our CEO, Ryan Rand. Bruce, please.
Good morning. At Pure Life Carbon, we're accomplishing some of our stewardship responsibilities through our Finance, Risk, and Audit Committee. I've been asked to chair that by the board. So this morning, Mark has asked me to elaborate on some of the activities of our FRA committee. The FRA committee has met on the following dates in calendar 2022: January 10th, January 21st, March 18th, June 14th, and June 24th. January 10th, we met to consider the August 31st, 2021 year-end financial statements. January 21st, we met to look through the Q1 financial results and a quarterly update. March 18th, again, was Q2 financial results and a quarterly update. We've had in-camera meetings. And June 24th, we met to review the Q3 financial results and quarterly update. The objective of the FRA committee is to meet quarterly to address financial results, meet specifically to review year-end financial statements, and have additional meetings when required to deal with non-routine FRA issues. The membership of the FRA committee has evolved over time. Currently, Gord Anderson, Kieran Bowes, and Bruce Picton represent the voting members of our FRA committee. Each meeting includes input from Mark Starrett, our chair, Ryan Rand, our CEO, Jeff Thompson, who oversees our capital raise activities, Catherine Breaker is our new corporate controller, and Deanne Stenny, who's a project accountant. Catherine participated in her first FRA committee meeting June 24th in her new role as the PLC corporate controller. The FRA committee is striving to meet quarterly to review financial results. The meeting is far more than just a quarterly review. Each meeting agenda provides for robust updates from management. In addition, the status of specific important finance projects are discussed. Jeff also provides detailed updates on the evolving capital raise efforts of the organization. Each meeting, we consider the risk landscape of PLC, discussing specific risks and responses to those risks. There's been significant positive evolution of the finance team and finance processes that continue. The effort of our team is impressive, and systems progress in our transforming business are aggressively being sought. The FRA committee continues to advance the FRA committee priorities in a reasonable manner. As it relates to human resources, Catherine Breaker, who's a CPA, has taken on the role of corporate controller. Deanne Stenny, who was formerly in that role, is transitioning into a project accountant for a role that's more on a part-time basis. Deanne's focus will be ERP implementation. Catherine continues to search for additional finance team resources in an effort to meet the significant demands of our growing business. Currently, she's working to add another senior accountant to the team. PLC is operating at a level 3 budget and forecasting status. Ryan and his team display strong teaming to manage financial resources while moving priority projects forward. Continued improvement over cost control and approval through stronger team cooperation has occurred. Continued improvement of control is expected from all of us. Jeff and Ryan keep the FRA committee apprised of the status of Pure Life Carbon capital activities each meeting. Included in the discussion is detail regarding non-dilutive sources. The board gets updates on this and regularly.
Perfect. Sorry about that, everyone. We had a power surge at the hotel that shut down internet. So what we've done is we are now going to be broadcasting audio. And we're going to be broadcasting by audio. All the poll questions and the Q&A will continue to go through. But Bruce, I'd invite you to maybe back up a minute to where you were and continue your conversation. And apologies to everyone for the technical difficulties.
So I'm going to pick up from human resources. I was talking about Catherine Breaker, who's a CPA. We just added in the role of corporate controller. Deanne Stenny, who was filling that position historically, is transitioning into a project accountant role on a part-time basis. Deanne's focus will be our ERP implementation that is currently underway with a timeline of completion, hopefully September 2022. Catherine continues to search for additional finance team resources in an effort to meet the significant demands of our growing business. Currently, she is working to add a senior accountant to the team. Budgeting and forecasting has always been important to the FRA committee. PLC is operating at a priority level 3, which requires our team to coordinate and carefully monitor and use our resources. Ryan and his team display strong teaming to manage financial resources while moving priority projects forward. We've had continued improvement over cost control and approval through stronger team cooperation. And we expect continued improvement in control as we go forward. Jeff and Ryan keep the FRA committee apprised of the status of PLC capital initiatives each meeting. Included in the discussion is detail regarding non-dilutive sources. The board gets updates regularly as well from Jeff and Ryan, and they're fully aware of our ongoing capital plan. We've worked extensively on financial modeling. Continued efforts to refine a consolidated operating model are underway. The evolving tool will allow for dynamic scenario analysis. This model considers our downstream operations, our upstream operations, and our evolving ICO. A really important project that has been undertaken for the last number of months is our due diligence effort and a building of a virtual data room. This important project has moved forward significantly. Catherine is leading the project with input of consultants. I think at this point in time, there's probably about 131 documents that are priority 1 for the data room, and this will continue to evolve. And upon completion at some point in the future, which we would call stage 2 of the data room, there'll be approximately 400 documents in there. ERP update is important to what we're doing. Deanna's leading the ERP implementation. An aggressive go live date of September 6th has been set. The FRA committee has been provided with a detailed ERP timeline from our management, and we are monitoring that. Each FRA committee meeting, we query management on their compliance with various requirements from CRA, including GST, provincial sales tax. We talk about environmental, health, and safety compliance as well. And management is represented consistently that PLC remains in compliance on these issues. We spend an increasing amount of time on risk. We talk about our insurance, which we believe is in relatively good shape, and we continue to investigate expanded insurance coverage as our business becomes more global. Enterprise risk management is on all our minds. Although we have deferred the formal development of an enterprise risk management framework to next fiscal year, the FRA committee routinely considers enterprise risk. Management is asked to comment on a spectrum of specific enterprise risk areas each meeting. We have a spectrum of risks, and management strives to proactively anticipate and mitigate negative outcomes. The FRA committee has initiated a listing of risks to consider. This list gets updated as new risks are identified. Currently, human resource risk has become an important part of our organization. It's the FRA's committee's intention to undertake a risk meeting over the next 3 to 6 months to move forward the development of a risk management framework. One of the responsibilities of our FRA committee is to oversee the relationship with BDO, who are Pure Life Carbon accountants. Currently, we find them to be independent. We find that they're providing review and other advice, and the relationship is strong at this point in time. So just in conclusion, that although we're a startup organization, Pure Life Carbon continues to build capacity and process in our finance team to allow PLC to manage the growing international opportunities of our downstream, upstream, and ICO business units. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bruce. I'd now like to call upon Gord Anderson, member of the Board of Directors, to speak to several aspects of the progress of Pure Life Carbon since our last AGM.
Thank you, Mark, and good morning. There has been a tremendous amount of progress since the end of our fiscal last year. And one of the most important developments has been the launch of 3 separate divisions. So going forward, I think it's helpful for you as shareholders and owners to think of us in that way. So if we look at what you're most familiar with, which is downstream, that's our core division built around our Red Deer facility. We're working this year and into 2023 to bring that facility into full capacity, building out a sales team around that to focus on North America, and also developing a reuse and recycle facility and a carbon gel facility in the Red Deer constituency, as well as a number of other R&D projects headed by one of our board members, Jim Hole. So that's continues to be one of our core fundamental focuses. We also stood up last fall a division called the Upstream Division, and that is the goal of that division is really to diversify our source of supply away from China. It was identified at the senior management level and at the board level that we had one of our key risks was our exposure to the Chinese market, and not just the Chinese market, but also the whole process of how we process the product, including pyrolysis and everything that's out of our control, but also costs going through the roof from, on average for us, probably 8,000 to 9,000 per container, up to as high as 40,000, and even now at a $20,000 level. So that division is moving to source bamboo our feedstock from Mexico, but a really concerted effort in the last 3-4 months in Southeast Asia, the Philippines, in Thailand, in Vietnam, and also in India to again diversify our supply, but also building a team. And Bruce talked about human resources. Human resources on this side is we're splitting the upstream into 2 divisions. And the first division is forestry. And we have 3 global experts in the forestry area. Kamish Salam, who is the former head of the World Bamboo Association based out of India, is covering Southeast Asia. Mark Sultan, based out of the Philippines, is again a global expert in bamboo and actually approves on the Philippines government all the bamboo permits. And Hermalson Cruz, covering Latin America, who has written over a dozen books over the last 35 years on bamboo. So it's the whole process of how we afforestation in new forest, reforestation, managing the forests, and then coming into a second component, the second division in upstream, which is our carbonization. And that's again a piece that we want to bring in and control within Pure Life Carbon in terms of the pyrolysis process to basically create the carbon solution that we then will bring to Red Deer, to our downstream final manufacturing facility. Now, the third division is a very exciting division as well, which is called our ICO division, our environmental impact and carbon offset division. And it's really a recognition that we actually have a positive carbon input all the way through our cycle, from when we start with the bamboo in terms of, as I mentioned, the reforestation, the afforestation, and we quantify that. And we then harvest sustainably, like 10 or 15% of the forest before that bamboo dies and releases carbon back in the atmosphere. But the key is we quantify all that. We take it through a pyrolysis, we trap that carbon. We also generate green energy from that process. And then we bring it back to the Red Deer facility, where we're also working hard on our environmental footprint there. So we're quantifying that. There are 3 protocols that we're leveraging right now to help quantify. And a lot of that is related to our non-dilutive funding as well, that we need to do that in terms of to meet the objectives of the Emission Reduction Alberta and the Sustainable Development Strategic Investment Funds and some of our core funding on the non-dilutive side. So we hired a group called Veresco at the start of this year in January, and they're one of the leading agricultural carbon credit organizations in the world. And they've been helping not just quantifying in early stages, but they're going to build our own protocol within Pure Life Carbon so that we're in a position to be a leader in this carbon story. And really that's, I think, the update on 3 very exciting divisions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much, Gord. I would invite shareholders to continue to add questions through the Q&A feature in the webinar. Once we conclude the final motions, we'll open it up for question and answer and bring Ryan to the table. Is there any further business to be brought before the meeting? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Gord Anderson, thank you for the motion to adjourn. Seconder?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Bruce Picton, seconded. You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify in the usual manner through the Zoom poll. Wonderful. So the motion is carried, and I declare that the formal part of the meeting is terminated. But I would now like to invite questions from our shareholders. Please put the Q&A, as you said, we'll be looking at those questions. And I would invite our CEO, Ryan Rand, to join me at the podium. And the first question was, can you please describe the long-term investments, the interests in the 2 other companies?
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. To answer that question, the long-term interest investments is shown in our financial reports. They total about $65 in value. They actually date back to the forming of Pure Life Carbon. And they're two corporations that were brought to the table by co-founder Dan Ronald, 172, and Aquaterra Farms. They held some IP, which has been transferred to Pure Life Carbon. And we are working in the future to clean up some of the reporting structure so that it shows a little bit better on the report. But that's what they're from. We are not making any active investments in other corporations. It's just simply from the founding of the business.
Perfect. The next question comes as it relates to related party transactions. During the year, through its normal course of operation, the company purchased various supplies and services from directors, shareholders, employees of the company. During the year, it was about just under $1.2 million. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, this is an interesting, question to be able to answer. What's fun about this in some ways is that most third parties that we work with end up becoming investors. And most investors that invest in us end up trying to find ways to work to consult with us. And that's a good thing when you're a small company and you have limited resources. So most of this is consulting income from many of our directors and shareholders who work for our company part-time, assisting in a variety of ways: corporate strategy and infrastructure deployment, some of our committee tasks, risk management, CapEx deployment, automation systems, human resources, and a whole bunch of other areas of the company. It is an area that we focus on cleaning up. We know that it doesn't always reflect well when you read a number that size on the financials. But in reality, that is the component that has enabled us to move the business as quickly as we have, is through the support of variety of shareholders and investors and directors and other people that have come into the company. So in a lot of those part-time cases, we're relying on consulting income to pay them for their services.
Brian, are there any updates you can share on expansion sites or future revenue potential?
Yeah, so expansion sites, as Gord mentioned, this is all kind of new information from last fiscal year. We launched the ICO and upstream divisions again because of challenges around raw feedstock and wanting to be able to reduce that risk. With that comes a whole bunch of new information and opportunity on a global level. So we look to areas of the world like the Philippines, India, Vietnam, West Africa, Mexico, and some other South American countries to supply us for our raw material on the upstream side. So we'll deploy reforestation or carbonization businesses into those areas in the future. Of course, as we expand and explore into those countries, each one of those countries asks us if we have an interest in also deploying downstream facilities, because of course, pretty much every market in the world can use various aspects of our material in different ways. So that's opening a lot of opportunity for us in the future that we're looking forward to understanding and pulling into a strategic plan. But on the downstream side of the business, we've really looked to focus on a couple of very specific markets. So of course, we already have our Alberta-based facility. So Alberta is a market that we work hard to develop. Some of the large ag producers in this province we've been working with for quite some time. And we hope to start seeing some revenue come from those relationships over the next few quarters. But we're also looking to some of the hotspots around the Canadian and American market, most notably California in the USA, and also Leamington, Ontario, which is a greenhouse hotspot. So we're doing a couple of changes from a sales perspective. I won't get into those today because they're still really early and the planning isn't baked on it, but we're looking to move to more of a substrate as a service model, which is something that's empowered to us because of our material being reusable and recyclable. So we're really focused on what we call the high value, low volume market for direct sales, and developing the lower value, high volume market for the substrate as a service model. From there, the last piece that I'll add is that, of course, we have strategic partners that we're working to develop around the world. We've been working on these relationships for a few years. And these types of relationships do take that kind of time to develop because there's a lot of USPs, unique selling propositions that we need to understand, our partners need to understand before we can effectively deploy our product into the market and go head to head with some of the large industry giants. So we of course are looking at the European market with a focus on a few specific countries over there, leveraging the relationships that we have with the strategic partners that we've been building for a couple of years. Thank you for the question.
Cool. I'll actually invite Bruce Picton back up to the podium. There's a question related to why we don't have an auditor in place and are doing a review engagement. So maybe even an experience share or what you've seen with private companies in the past.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Our advisors, BDO, have indicated that our evolution warrants, allows for us to continue doing review engagements at this point in time. We started with notice to readers, quite frankly, and have evolved to review engagements. It's a quick growing company, so we're anticipating obviously growing reporting requirements into the future. We've started the conversation around what kind of infrastructure, what kind of processes, and what kind of capacity we'll need to eventually meet the demands of IFRS. But at this point in time, we're operating under ASPE as a private company, and we're confident that we're right in doing that in the short term. But we do note the importance of continuing to monitor that and expecting in the future to have increased reporting requirements.
Bringing Ryan back up, thanks very much for your continued questions in the chat room. The next question is, do you have any updates on any patent applications that may be affecting the company at this time?
Yeah, so we have, excuse me, we have 2 patents in the application process. One is our older patent around the process and systems that we use to manufacture our charged carbon product lines. That patent has advanced through to the final stages. We've launched it in multiple countries, and each country is kind of in a little bit of a different situation around what stage it's in. But we have started to receive some questions back from those specific countries around finalizing that patent. So we do expect that by the end of this calendar year, that we'll have either some or all the countries that we filed in. And on that note, it can be difficult to select which countries you want to pursue around these patent applications, because obviously there's many countries in the world and each one of them comes with a certain cost and process to be able to file. So we looked at the specific countries that were strategic to us for each individual patent, whether it's applying on the upstream or downstream side of the company. And we chose to select the priorities for each one of those patents. There's a second patent that was started by co-founder Dan Ronald. That's part of a new ARDAR project. We received roughly $600,000 in corporate financing or grant financing to advance that carbon gel patent. So there's going to be a whole bunch of work done over the next calendar year around that particular piece. We did obviously file a statement of patents so that it's registered. It actually happened about 1.5 years ago, but because we didn't move the project forward through that period, it lapsed and we had to reapply, I think, in November, December of last year. So that reapplication is active and we will pursue that over the next 1 to 2 years and then move it through the standard kind of course of patent processing. Typically for us, we try to delay as long as we can on the patent process. We don't want to rush the patent to market and show everybody, what we're trying to develop. So we stay a little bit ambiguous around the original applications of what we are. We just use words like carbon gel and novel gel substrate for propagation or shaping of our medium into containers without the use of plastics and those types of things. And then from there, we'll go to work with Red Deer Polytechnic is going to do some of the work. Lethbridge College will do some of the work. And we'll pull all that detailed information. We'll delay reporting that as long as we possibly can. And then on the third side, we are working on patents. We don't have any filed yet, but we do have some paperwork being done on the upstream side around how our reforestation systems work, how our pre-processing works before we get into pyrolysis, and then the pyrolysis system. So there will continue to be patents, I'm sure, that spark up from there, but that's what's on the cards for today.
Ryan, the next question is, would you care to give commentary on the revenue forecast for 2023? And when are you forecasted to be in the black?
Yeah, that's a good question. So over the last, I'd say 2 years now, we've taken a bit of a beating due to COVID and other challenges that exist strategically around the world, mostly, and Gord referred to it earlier around purchasing our raw materials. Shipping costs went from $9,000 to $40-some thousand US delivered per container. In addition to that, a lot of the equipment that we need for our Red Deer County facility just seems to suffer almost endless delays. And I'll use a current example of this because I think it's a good one. You know, over 8 months ago, we ordered stairs, something as simple as stairs for our manufacturing facility. And those stairs have been delayed over and over and over again. Every time that they're supposed to be delivered, we get notified they're another 6 weeks behind. We've changed suppliers and vendors and welding companies in the process to be able to try and shorten that time frame. But the reality is we developed the Red Deer County facility to the point where those stairs are now bottlenecked. We can't get pod 3 and pod 4, which are paid for and ready to be installed, going. We can't get our tank farm systems hooked up because they're very large stairs that have to be maneuvered through the main part of the manufacturing plant. So we're certainly behind on what we've talked about in the past from a revenue generation perspective. There is more reason to that than just delays because of COVID. I certainly don't want to come across like we're just blaming all of our problems on COVID, because we're not. There's a whole bunch of other challenges, and maybe not challenges. I'd actually use the word opportunity around building more strategic relationships. And we've really focused with a couple of key companies that are dominant in the marketplace on a global level. And a CEO recently said to me in a meeting, when we launch this product and we get in the ring for the first time with our competitors, we're getting in the ring with the heavyweight champions. We are the main event when we go to the market, and we have to make sure that we deploy that properly. And in the last year, we've had an incredible amount of positive learnings around how we're going to take our product to the market. And those strategic discussions and understandings between our companies have played a real pivotal role in how exactly we're going to design the go-to-market strategy in the future. So from facilities being behind, or from strategy and sales strategy developing, we don't have great revenue. We do expect that we will have revenue in this quarter. And we do have a lot of strategic relationships with distributors in North America, mostly, some over in Europe, Brazil, and some other countries around the world that we'll be traveling to in the next month or so to work out the final details around our distribution agreements. As far as in the black goes, that is a complex question because of the infrastructure deployment that we have. So if you look at Red Deer County, for example, we're looking at that facility and operations from that facility being into the black next year. But when you tack on new facility deployment into Mexico, that's taking a lot of CapEx, or Southwest United States for the California market, that's about 45 million in CapEx. As a company as a whole, we probably won't be in the black for quite some time because we're going to continue infrastructure development into the Philippines, India, and all other areas of the world. So we're looking really at what is the financial plan for each individual facility? When do they cash flow? When do they become profitable? And then how does that fit into everything that's happening, at a greater corporate level? So I hope I asked that question. And if not, send me an email and I'll dig in deeper.
Brian, there's a series of questions in terms of our products and competition. So how is Pure Life Carbon defining and creating a category for its products, first of all? And then a couple of questions about, with the 2 patents, how do you create, maintain a competitive moat beyond to prevent other well-funded competitors from stealing market shares, and maybe just a broader commentary on the competitive environment?
Sure. So around the patents and kind of the go-to-market strategy, we have some very key advantages that none of our competitors share. And if I look at competitors, I'm specifically looking at stone wool producers, coconut coir blenders, or peat blenders. There are some other smaller substrate types out there in use, but for the most part, those are the types of competitors that we're looking at. Each one of those products is basically a single-use product. So in some cases, you have companies that are recycling cocoa coir once or twice with some recycling systems. They do sacrifice, in some cases, some quality when they do so. But in our case, our material just doesn't break down. And we've been doing a lot of work lately around trying to understand more about what is the reuse and recycling process behind the medium. And it can be as simple or basic as a grower shaking the medium off the root system and regrowing in it themselves, or it can move into our realm of control where we're sifting that material through screens, sterilizing it, maybe calling it something new, and sending it back to those clients for reuse. Or it can get as complex as bringing in our material and biomass that we biodigest down into multiple different types of products. And co-founder Chris Vance, who's working on the ICO side of the company, has done a great circular economy model that I think most of the shareholders will get to see here in the coming months. But it all kind of ties into larger projects that we're working with around Emissions Reduction Alberta and how we can create circular opportunities within our business model. And the reason I dig into that in detail, or a little bit of detail at least, is because that is a differentiator between us and our competitors. They don't have the opportunity or option to be able to, one, look at their business from a circular economy perspective, but also reuse their product, or like what we're going to do in our case, use product as substrate as a service. So I think from a strategic advantage, that's something that we'll have. And then the other component is locations. And this is actually one of the really key components that we're going to be working with in the upcoming months with strategic partners around what are the key strategic locations for us to deploy. Because your location or our customer's location to the medium that they're going to use is extremely important. If you look, for example, at the California market, growing medium prices are much higher down there because of their distance to the sources. And for us, Mexico is only a few hours away. So that's going to give us a strategic advantage in that area. So I think, those questions are very broad and they cover a lot of different areas of the company that's moving. But what I can tell you is that we might not be fast at how we're deploying some of these strategies, but we certainly want to do it right. So sometimes we have to take a step back. We think we have the right plan, and then we get more information that causes us to pivot. And pivots are something that are in our DNA, and we've had to do since we've begun this company. And I think that when you see the next rounds of capital coming out, you'll be excited about some of the pivots that we've made over the last year.
Ryan, just a follow-up question on the ICO strategy. Are you able to answer whether or not you expect revenue stream from any potential carbon credits to begin in the next 12 to 24 months? Or maybe just in terms of the process, how long it might take?
Yeah, so from a carbon credit perspective, we're really hesitant to put any revenue anywhere on our financials or advertise that. And the reason being is there's just so much greenwashing out there around we can create, this for carbon credit potential or that for a revenue source. And usually it's not accurate. So we're choosing to be a little bit quiet around that. I can say that we are modeling some very conservative numbers, although we're not presenting them to anybody, just so we understand the financial opportunity within our own company. But it takes, in some cases, years to create some of these carbon pathways. And Chris, through ICO, has been working with industry leaders around launching 3, as Gord Anderson mentioned. We do expect that those 3, or at least 2 of them, will be something that become active very soon, probably in the next 3 to 6 months. But in reality, I don't want anybody to hold me to that, because it's a evolving market, regulatory changes almost on a weekly basis. It's very difficult to keep up with. So I would say at this point, we're very confident that we'll create revenue from ICO and from the carbon credit strategies that we have in place, but we're very hesitant to put numbers out there because it's just simply too early for us to responsibly do so. Thank you.
That's it. I'll give one final call for questions just as we summarize here. But thank you very much to everybody that was in attendance today. We very much appreciate the engagement. And please know that all of us, the board of directors and management of Pure Life Carbon, are happy to interact with shareholders on an ongoing basis. You will hear and see a lot of news being circulated to you and to the market in the months that follow. And just as an opportunity as we move forward too, Fred Munn has done a fantastic job in communicating with many of you, many since the very beginning. And we're also going to be giving in the months that follow Fred a little bit of support. So you may see new names and faces that allow him to focus on other areas and yet still continue to keep shareholders updated in real time as best we can of the exciting happenings at Pure Life Carbon. With that, as I reminded before, we will edit the power surge out of the, so it'll sound like and seem like it was a very, very smooth meeting today. Thank you very much for your patience. We understand that there was a broad outage in Red Deer. that caused it this morning, not just at the hotel, which was very interesting. But thank you very much again, and have a wonderful day. Take care.